Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach, happy Simchat Torah. Today begins my favorite Jewish holiday of the year, Simchat Torah, where we finish reading the end of the Torah that we've been reading all year, and then we start over from the beginning, from Genesis, from creation. It's a time of great celebration, and let's get to it. So today what we're going to do is we're going to finish reading the Torah. We're going to read the last few verses, and then the beginning of the Torah, the first few verses. And then also what I want to do is take you on a tour of the entire Torah, pointing out some of the major highlights of the entire thing. Major stories, major lessons, major teachings, major mitzvot, commandments, a little bit from each book. So let's get to it. Let's do our Torah reading, and also let's take a tour of our Torah scroll. So I've got in my hands right now one of our Torah scrolls. This is a very interesting Torah scroll. It's a Persian scroll, and it's made out of antelope skin. So it looks a little bit different than our other Torah scrolls, and from many Ashkenazi Torah scrolls as well. We're going to be beginning with this Torah scroll, reading from the end of the Torah, from the end of the Book of Deuteronomy. If you would, we'll all have the aliyah to the Torah together, to say the blessings before and after the Torah reading. So please join with me as we have our aliyah to the Torah. First, I'll call everyone up. Ya'amod kol ha'kehila la Torah. Arise, entire kehila, entire community, to the Torah. Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorach. Baruch Adonai hamavorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch ata Adonai noten ha'torah. V'lo kam navi od b'Yisrael k'Moshe asher yado Adonai panim el panim l'chol had otot hamoftim asher shlacho Adonai la'asot be'eretz Mitzrayim lefaro u'lechol avadav u'lechol artso u'lechol hayad hachazaka u'lechol hamorah Hagadol asher asa Moshe le'enei kol Yisrael. Never again did there arise in Israel a prophet like Moses, whom the Eternal singled out face to face, for the various signs and portents that the Eternal sent him to display in the land of Egypt, against Pharaoh and all his courtiers, and his whole country, and for all the great might and awesome power that Moses displayed before all Israel. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz ve'haaretz hayita tohu vavohu ve'choshech al penei tehom ve'ruach Elohim merachefet al penei hamayim. Vayomer Elohim yehi or, vayhi or, vayahar Elohim et haor ki tov, vayivdel Elohim ben haor uven hachoshech, vayikra Elohim laor yom ulechoshech kara laila, vayhi erev vayhi voker yom echad. When God was about to create heaven and earth was a chaos, unformed, and on the chaotic water's face there was darkness. Then God's Spirit glided over the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And when God saw how good the light was, God divided the light from the darkness. God then called the light day, and called the darkness night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. We have just completed our Torah reading. We just finished reading from the book of Genesis out of this scroll right here. So please join with me for the blessing after the Torah reading. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. So not only are we having our Torah reading tonight, but we're going to take a tour of the entire Torah scroll. We're going to look at a little bit from each of the 5 books. Okay, what we just read was the very first book of the Torah, Bereshit, or Genesis. This is the story of creation right here. One thing I want to point out is the Torah starts right here with the letter Bet, like the letter B. It's the second letter in the Hebrew alphabet. And one of the questions that our ancient sages had asked was, why not start the Torah scroll with Aleph, or something like A, the first letter of the alphabet? And the answer was, because Bet, the second letter, looks like a 3-sided square, a square missing one side. But the square is closed on 3 sides. It's closed above, it's closed towards the beginning this way, and closed below. That means there are 3 questions that we really have no idea what the answers to, because the way to knowledge is blocked to us. We can't ask what's above, we can't ask what's below, and we can't ask what came before. We can only go this way in the Torah scroll, the side of the Bet that's open. We can ask about our world, we can ask about the kind of lives that we lead and that we're supposed to lead, but there's some things that are just beyond us, what's above, what's below, and what comes before creation. There's a lot of things in the book of Genesis. Genesis is like early family stories of the Jewish people. If you ever get a chance to speak to one of your older living relatives and ask them their memories from childhood, or ask them about their parents or their grandparents, you get some of these amazing early stories, or earlier stories anyways, about your own family history. Reading the book of Genesis is a little bit like that, except we go way, way back. We learn about Abraham and Sarah. We learn about Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob, Rachel and Leah, and a whole bunch of other people that form the very beginnings of the Jewish family, the Jewish people. This is before slavery in Egypt. This is before the 10 Commandments. This is early, early stuff, and it's all in here. In addition to what we just read, the story of creation right here, and a few other very early things like Noah and the flood. That comes next right after this. But this begins our tour of the Torah scroll, beginning with the book of Genesis, chapter 1, the creation of the world. Right here we have the beginning of the book of Exodus, the second book in the Torah. It says, Ele Shmot B'nai Yisrael. These are the names of the Israelites that came to Egypt. This is the story of how the Israelites were slaves, became enslaved in Egypt, how Pharaoh enslaved them, and how Moses was called upon by God to lead the Israelites out of slavery. This is the story that we tell at Passover Seder every year, as well as when we read from the book of Exodus in the Torah. But that's not the only thing in Exodus. We also will have the song at the sea when the Israelites are leaving Egypt and they sing. We'll look at that next. And then after that comes the 10 Commandments, which we'll also have a chance to look at. So we're still in the book of Exodus, and when the Israelites left Egypt, as they were leaving, they sang a song at the sea. This entire thing is the song at the sea, and the reason why it's written like this with all these spaces is in between words is so that it looks a little bit like the waves in the sea. The scribe, the person who wrote the scroll, wants to illustrate it in a way, but we can't have pictures, so the scribe did it with the way the words were written so that it looks like the waves. So this is the song at the sea, and you'll probably recognize some of it because right here is Micha Mocha, the song that we sing every service. Micha Mocha Ba'ilim Adonai, who is like you, God, amongst all the other gods that are worshipped. Micha Mocha Nidar Ba'Kodesh, who is like you, God, amongst all the holy. So that's our song, Micha Mocha, from the book of Exodus, the second book in the Torah. Okay, we're in the book of Exodus, and this is where the 10 Commandments begin. God gives Moses 10 Commandments on top of Mount Sinai, and here they are, the first time they appear, beginning with Vaidaber Elohim, which means, and God spoke at Kol Hadvarim Ha'ele Lemor, all of these words, saying, Anochi Adonai Elohecha, I am the eternal your God. Continuing on all the way here with the 10 Commandments. Right here we begin with the book of Leviticus. This is book 3 in the Torah. It says, Vayikra El Moshe, and the Eternal One called to Moses. Right here we have what could be the most important verse in the entire Torah. It says, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, ani Adonai. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Eternal. This is the basis for how we're supposed to treat other people. We're supposed to love them just like we love ourselves, that everybody has equal worth and deserving of equal dignity. And that's right here, the golden rule, right at the center of our Torah scroll. Okay, we are now looking at a different Torah scroll, number one. This is our Holocaust memorial scroll. It comes from what nowadays is the Czech Republic outside of Prague. And this scroll is about as old as the United States of America. It's one of the few remnants left from the Jewish community there that's still around to this day. Our congregation, TKC, is its custodian right here. But we're using this scroll right now to look at the beginning of the Book of Numbers. You can see this big space here happens every time there's a separation from one book to the other. So this is the very end of the book of Leviticus, the third book, and this is the start of the fourth book, the Book of Numbers. And we're just going to focus right here on the very beginning. It says, Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe bamidbar Sinai. And the Eternal spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. Right here, we have the bulk of the Israelites 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, in Bamidbar, in the wilderness of Sinai. At the beginning of the book, they're still pretty early on in their journey, but just in the fourth book, that's when most of the 40 years happens as they journey around. This is when God decides that the Israelites who came out of Egypt aren't going to be the ones to enter into the promised land. It's going to be for their children. That's why they spend 40 years in the wilderness. It's going to be their children that come into it. It's in the book of Numbers as well that we learn that Moses is not going to be the leader forever. Moses is not going to take everybody into the promised land. That's going to fall onto his successor, Joshua. And so we're towards the end of the Torah, 4 out of 5 books right here. This is the 4th out of 5 books. The 5th book we'll come to next, the Book of Deuteronomy. Those are Moses' last words to the Israelites. But right here we have the bulk of their 40-year journey. And right here we have the beginning of the Book of Deuteronomy. It says, Ela hadivarim asher diber Moshe el kol Yisrael. These are the words that Moses spoke to all of Israel. And the whole thing of Deuteronomy in Hebrew means words, divarim, words. And these are Moses' last words to the Israelites. So the Shema is one of the most important prayers we have in Jewish tradition, and it comes from the book of Deuteronomy. It comes from right here. So this is the word Shema. It says, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Eternal is our God, the Eternal alone. And then continues into the Ve'ahavta. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, until right down here. So that is a highlight from the book of Deuteronomy.